Hello and welcome. This is Power Cuties, and this is going to be my guide for the Lissandra adventure for Path of Champions. So this adventure came out this year. It's the last adventure that they've released, and also the most difficult. Um, Let me just switch over here. So I'll put the link for the guide, and then I'll also put the links for the Twitch channel and the Discord server as well. I welcome you guys to both. The Discord channel, we do have a lot of really good Path of Champion players that have high-level discussions for various relic builds and champion builds. So I welcome you guys if that's what you're interested in. Because I'm not going to talk as much about specific champion strategies in this guide. We're just going to kind of go over the adventure itself in general. So let's jump right in. Actually, so as you can see, the Lissandra adventure is recommended for 5 stars, meaning that this is the highest difficulty adventure, and by quite a bit actually. I would say the Lissandra adventure is significantly more difficult than the Aurelian Soul one. For Aurelian Soul, I usually recommend champions to be 2 stars and level 20 to 25. That is probably a little bit low for Lissandra. For Lissandra, I feel that it is almost a necessity that you really should have 3 relic slots unlocked. So the 3rd relic slot unlocks at level 25. That will be a common slot. And then if you want to do 3 rares, you'll need to level all the way to max, which is level 30. So my recommendation for Lissandra is to use champions that are between the levels of 25 to 30. And I would say that the stars will depend on the champion. There definitely are champions that are just fine at 2 stars. I can talk a little bit about them later. Some champions you would want to have them at 3 stars. To get the full rewards for the Lissandra adventure, you need to beat it with 5 different champions. We'll go over the tier list of 5 champions that I would recommend for this adventure. Alright, so the first thing I want to talk about is that this specific adventure has a few things that are actually different than the other adventures. The other adventures have fairly preset orders, whereas the preset order in Lissandra is a little bit different. So we're going to jump in and I'll show you what I mean by that. So first of all, I just kind of want to give you guys an appreciation of the map. It's a busy map, and we will break it down a little bit. We'll go through the different paths and the mutators and fights in just a sec here. But we're going to start with the differences. So things that are different in the Lissandra map is when you start the adventure, you don't jump into the first battle right after the first power. So normally you get a first power, and then you jump into your first battle, and then you do a support champion. Here, it's quite different. The very first node is your support champion, so that's the first thing you pick. Second thing you do is you take your first power, and then third, you will get a gold chest. This is random. You can get either a common, rare, or epic chest. This will be full value of gold. I'll mention the relevance in a sec. And then you get a shop. So you get all 4 of these things before you even do your first fight, and believe me, you need them because the difficulty just gets out of hand sometimes. Even these first fights can be extremely difficult. I have lost multiple times on just the first fight. So there's your order to start with. So you do kind of get an idea of the direction your deck is going to build before you even do the first fight, which is really nice. The second thing I want to mention is, even though there are a few shops on the map here, including this one before the first fight, none of the shops will sell powers. So instead, the shops will have more of a format that you are accustomed to in monthlies. So the first option will have the 6 cards that you can just purchase with items. And then the second option, instead of being a power, will be 3 cards from your deck with a item upgrade, and they're fairly pricey. They're about like $225 or $300 if it's a champion that gets the upgrade. So no powers that you can buy in the shops anywhere on the map. Instead, you can buy a item upgrade for one of the cards. Another thing that is they don't tell you, so it is important that you know this. So there's mini bosses. There's actually 2 rounds of mini bosses here. So It That Stares, She Who Wanders, and Dark Lord Inquisitor are the first round, and then the second round you've got Ornn, Trundle, and Anivia. And after the mini bosses, unlike the other mini bosses, you do not get a full heal. You are left with the HP you had. So do be aware of that. Do not go low and just assume that you're going to get healed to full, because that is not how it works here. If you take a beating, you're going to leave with low HP. The other thing about the mini bosses, and this is actually something that I do want to talk to Riot about, is there is no champion item after the mini bosses, and you do not get more champion copies after the mini bosses. So if you do not find champion item nodes in your map, you could easily get to the end Lissandra fight with 2 copies of the base champion and 2 copies of the support, which, you know, can be pretty terrifying because it is Path of Champions after all. I do actually want to talk to Riot about this. I think that this doesn't feel very good at all. I think not drawing your champion just leads to a miserable experience, and I mean, it's literally called Path of Champions, so that is probably something that they should fix. The next thing, so I mentioned about the gold here, and the reason why I said that is, so this first gold node is a normal gold node, and then after that, I don't think I have one that's unlocked here, but oh yeah, here we go. After that, well, I mean, you can't see it, but after that, all gold chests will be half their normal value. So a common gold chest after the first one will be 50, a rare will be, what is it, 100, I think, and then epic would be like, I think it's like 150 or something like that. But it's half the value. So that is significant when you're considering what you want to buy in the shops later in the map. Also significant if you're considering doing a Bounty Hunter Renown build. So your Bounty Hunter build is going to be a lot weaker on the Lissandra map. It doesn't mean you can't play it. It just means it's going to be a lot weaker than, for example, the Aurelian Soul map. The other thing to mention is there's quite a few fixed nodes, so meaning there will always be a specific encounter or fight in a specific area. So one, I'll mention the really important ones. We'll go back to them after. So one is on the top path here. I should also mention, so there's 3 branches. So there's a top, mid, and bottom. And there is some cross-play, like you can go from the bottom here back up to mid. You can go from top to back to mid, or you can go back up to top again. So there's a few ways to get into mid. It's a bit harder to go, like if you're gonna go top all the way, you pretty much have to go straight top, and same with bot, you pretty much have to go straight bot. On the top map here, there's an ethereal remitter, which, I mean, normally that isn't like that exciting of a node, but for this one, for the Lissandra adventure, it is actually very important. Another important one, I guess I can't see it yet, there's a mind meld here, and this mind meld also is not a normal mind meld, because in a normal mind meld, when you cut a card, the next round of cards that you can cut cost double the HP. In this one, it does not. It always costs 2 HP. So you can cut a lot of cards on this map, and it is very beneficial to do so, I will say. The other ones that I just want to mention too is, so up here, it doesn't show you, but this node here is a Howling Abyss, and then down here we have the Messenger, so the Doggos, and then the Jubilant Poro, so a Poro fight down here on the bottom. And as you can see, they're red nodes, so is the Howling Abyss, so that means they are vicious enemies, so more harder fights. Next. I'm gonna bring this. I'm gonna bring my slides back over here. So we're gonna talk about the mutators next. So there's 2 things to understand about the mutators. So one is there are 5 mutators for the map that will be randomly assigned to each node, and then each fight has its own mutator. So basically every fight will have 2 mutators, one that is always connected to that fight, and a second one that will be a random 1 out of 5. I'm going to talk about the ones that are random out of 5 first, because those are going to appear more often, so I mean, it's worth just being aware of them. It also will actually help plan sometimes your routes as well, because there might be some things that you want to avoid. So these ones I've called the Terrors of True Ice, are the map-wide possibilities. So we'll go over the 5. So all things grow cold. This is such a nasty mutator. It doubles the stats and grants fearsome to the first unit the foe plays each round. This is the hardest mutator, just so you are aware. You may want to avoid this in like the first fight or two, because it's very easy to take an L with this mutator. They just can put out so much stats that it's very, very hard to keep up with them. If they get like an overwhelm or something like that, it can just like, you just lose on the spot sometimes. Now, having said that, I mean, it is beatable. It's definitely beatable. And it will depend on your champion as well as to how well you'll play into it. But I really want to emphasize that this one is the hardest one, so just be aware. This next one, At Last They Awaken. This one is, I would say, the easiest one, even though the foe starts with an extra mana, which is crazy. That's just how difficult this map is. So in this one, the foe starts with an extra mana, so they basically just have an extra mana at the start of the game. And if they have 10 mana gems and the attack token, they get a 0-cost Watcher in hand. So you don't want the game to go on for too long, which is honestly pretty hard with some of these fights. Sometimes there's just nothing you can do if they're going to drop the Watcher. But, I mean, the Watcher will take your deck down to 3 cards, so you still have a few turns to win after the Watcher comes down. Next one we're going to talk about is I Am Inevitable. So this one is when one of the foe's units survives damage, grant it tough. If it already has tough, grant it +2/+2 instead. This one, like, a lot of people think this is the hardest one. So the thing about this mutator is it's absolutely brutal on specific fights. So it can be absolutely nightmarish on the Lissandra fight. There's a few other ones that that make it that combo very, very like strongly for the foe. So it does depend on which foe it is. But in of itself, it's not necessarily that bad. But there's just some opponents that really take advantage of it and scale like crazy. I would almost say the same thing for the next one, the Frost Gathers. So this one, the units are your units are vulnerable, and their units all have +0/+2. There are a few fights where this is just an absolute nightmare. I mean, there's literally a fight where all your opponent's stuff has like quick attack or overwhelm, and they are jerks, and they'll just like wipe your board with quick attacks, or they'll just pull to like literally do overwhelm damage, even though it's a bad fight for them. They don't care. They just want to push as much damage as they can. It becomes really annoying. And then the last one, this one is kind of a medium difficulty one, but can get out of control on a couple fights. And the secrets hidden by the frost is when the foe gets the attack token, they frostbite your strongest unit, and they summon a spelling mistake, Rhyme Fang pack. So that is a 0/4 wolf that has +1 attack for every time they frostbite you. So for example, there's a enemy where every time you summon a unit, it gets frostbitten, gets completely out of control with this this fight. Oh, the Rhyme Fang pack, by the way, has overwhelm. So yeah, it can be nasty. Okay. The only thing I wanted to mention with the rest of these fights is I split them into first wave and second wave. The reason for that is there are specific fights that only appear in the first 2 battles, and then, or I should say, there's specific fights that only appear in battles 3+, third battle and forward. They'll never appear in the first 2 battles. These ones will appear in the first 2 battles. Sometimes they do actually appear in later ones too. Not always, though. Some of them don't, I think. But sometimes they can appear in later fights. But these are the ones you can expect in the first 2 battles. These are ones in the later half of the map. I'm going to just scroll down. So as you kind of saw on the map, There's 2 waves of mini bosses, and then there's the final boss, Lissandra. We'll talk quickly about what they do as well. So the first mini bosses, there's 3 set ones, and so all 3 of them will be on the map. So that can be a decision factor on the route that you take. So Darklorn Inquisitor, when they summon a landmark with countdown, advance it 4 rounds. So obviously they just spam thralls, but they're not that fast. They're nowhere near as fast as the Lissandra. That stairs. This is a really interesting fight. So they do absolutely nothing for the first 2 rounds of the game, and then on round 3, all their cards in hand will be reduced 6 mana cost, and they will just start spamming big boys. So what you want to do is you either want to win on the first 2 turns, which is difficult. I think it has they have 60 HP, so it's not easy. Or you want to get them low and then have some way to survive 1 more round and then kind of finish them off quickly after that. It is a brutal fight though. And then She Who Wanders, when one of the player units strikes the Nexus, it gives it -2, -0. If it had 4 or less power, it is just poof, gone, obliterated. So this one is one of the ones where kind of the opposite of That Stairs, you actually want to build your board first. You want to build stats on your board and then kind of one-shot them or two-shot them instead of aggro rushing them. And then the second mini bosses, so we've got Anivia. So Anivia starts with 10 mana gems. So similar to Karma, except you don't get 10 mana gems, you get 1 extra mana gem. This actually sounds terrifying and terrible. It's not quite as bad as it sounds because the Anivia deck cards don't have very many good upgrades on their cards. So a lot of their cards are just base cards. The Anivia herself does actually have Scout, which is annoying, but a lot of the cards in her deck don't really have perks or items. So it's not that bad, but it can be, unfun. The first few turns are usually pretty brutal. We've got Ornn. So Ornn is actually an interesting one. So game start, they get a Weaponsmith Apprentice and a Favored Artisan. Every turn, they get to forge all their units. So they're all getting +1/+1, and if they have weapons, the weapons are growing. And then on top of that, it's not a power, but just their forge spell costs 0. So they don't even have to pay mana. And I believe is it 0 or is it double casted? Anyway, they can start to ramp their stats really quickly. It can be a nasty fight. And then Trundle, when the foe summons an 8+ cost unit, grant foes +8/+8. This is kind of one of those other ones where it's kind of like That Stairs, where you want to win fast. You want to win before they can start slamming down their big ones. Compared to That Stairs, you actually do have more time with the Trundle, which is nice. But again, you do not want to mess around for too long. And then, of course, we have Lissandra. So Lissandra is such a nasty fight. So when they summon a landmark, advance their landmarks by 3. So obviously they love to spam thralls and things that make thralls and get a lot of thralls. So enjoy fighting those thralls. And then on top of that, they have this kind of check and balance to make sure that you don't get to just spam out and go infinite and win on turn 1. So each round after you play 3 cards, your cards cost 3 more that round. This is really brutal for some champions. There's just some champions that you want to be playing multiple cards in a turn, and it just really hoses them down. So always keep that in mind when you're drafting a deck. So for example, a good example I can give you is I usually love to draft Tellstones. I love Tellstones against the Aurelian Soul map. Well, Tellstones are 2 casts, which means you can only play 1 more card before you get that 3 more cost that round, and Tellstones for that reason are not very good against the Lissandra map, which is kind of sad because it's one of my favorites. So here on this tab, we're going to talk about the encounter difficulties. So I split them into very hard, medium, easy. The easy ones are the ones that you probably want to ideally fight. Now, having said that, it really does depend on the combination of the mutators. So for example, with Omen Hawk, Omen Hawk's mutator is their top card in their deck has +20/+0. And then, but the thing that's fair is that their deck does not have any Overwhelm or Elusive. But the thing that is not fair is they can easily have the power where their stats are doubled and have Fearsome. So they can just go turn 1, 40 attack, Fearsome, and if you don't have a Fearsome blocker, you lose on turn 1, and that's that. So even though I have Omen Hawk here on easy, it really does depend on its Mutator pairing as well. But that's just kind of like in general what I would say, but you always have to consider the Mutator it's with. Again, I want to make some mentions here. So for the very hard for the second wave, so Howling Abyss is that fixed fight that I was mentioning. It's extremely difficult. It's extremely RNG. I usually just completely avoid it. We'll talk a little bit about pathing later. Vriana and Bone Scryer and Woolly Snail Moth are ones that I've taken many losses to. So just beware. Like even like any mutator with these ones can be very nasty. And then I'm going to talk about the mini bosses as well. So the first 3 mini bosses, I think that That Stairs is the hardest. They really put down a lot of stuff, a lot of stats on turn 3, and they have a lot of overwhelm as well. So they can push a lot of damage and kill you quickly if you can't beat them fast. She Who Wanders is like on the other end. So that's the one where I was telling you that the better strategy might be to build a board and then kind of finish them off when you have a bunch of stats. And I mean, that usually works a lot better for a lot of the champions. And then Dark Lord Inquisitor is kind of in between. It is difficult. A lot of the time you will take damage to their thralls, but it's kind of not as bad as That Stairs, but it is easier than She Who Wanders. For the second set of mini bosses, it's a bit hard to say because again, this one is actually quite champion specific. In general, I find Ornn is the most dangerous. Trundle is the least dangerous, but it does depend on your champion and your build. The thing about Ornn that is very, very dangerous is, like we mentioned, his weapons will scale up very quickly because of the Forge every turn. They already start with units on board, so they'll be able to like stick weapons on them quickly. But the thing that's really scary about Ornn is they actually do run, I forget the name of it, but it's the 2 mana +2/+0 Overwhelm equipment. And if they get that and they start ramping stats on it, they're just going to keep cycling that Overwhelm unit on everything. Like you're going to kill a unit and they're just going to put the Overwhelm on something else and push damage. Then you kill that unit, they drop another unit, put the Overwhelm on that. And the damage can build up very, very quickly, and to the point where you can just straight up lose because of the overwhelm. The reason I have Trundle in the bottom is, even though which is funny because That Stairs I think is the hardest, whereas Trundle, which is similar in terms of you can't really like play around or mess around with it. But the thing is, by the time you reach that point in the map, if you can't beat Trundle by turn like 8 to 9 mana, you really have no chance of beating Lissandra. I'll just tell you straight up, like Lissandra is going to just take you down. So like you should be ready for Trundle by that point, because I mean otherwise, like what are you doing against Lissandra anyways? And then Anivia's in the middle. All right, let's talk about the map a little bit. So when we look at the map here, it's a very busy map. It's really hard to make sense of things. But there are patterns that are consistent, some connections that are consistent. One thing that I kind of use to simplify the pathing is straight top, top mid, straight mid, bot mid, and straight bot. Okay, so that's a very nice way to simplify the pathing. And I'm going to go back to my document here. So I made the map here too. I mean, it's still pretty messy, but it's a little bit clearer. I know even this one is very busy, but again, it's a little bit clearer and it's a little bit easier to follow when I say, like top mid, for example. So you can kind of follow how that goes. So you go top and then you go down here and you go mid, for example. And then I'll talk about some strategies for pathing. So the two most important nodes on the map at this moment. I don't know if it's going to get buffed or nerfed or what. But the two most important nodes on this map are Ethereal Remitter and Mind Meld. So because of that, the most popular pathing that people go to is they go top, they go to the Ethereal Remitter, they fight their mini boss, they go down to Mind Meld, and then they go through here into Lissandra. So that is, like, some people only do this path. I don't think that's correct. I don't think this is the only path you should do. Like, I think the other ones have viability as well. But we'll talk about this specific path, the top mid path. So when you go through here, Ethereal Remitter plus 1 power is what you're getting. And the Ethereal Remitter, the thing about the double negative powers that you get from them, because you're generally weaker than Lissandra, getting negative powers hurts her more than it hurts you. So that actually is a good thing for once. Like in the other adventures, it's usually a drawback, but here it's actually not that bad. And just as a reminder, I do have the Ethereal Remitter powers here. So actually, I might as well talk about this mini remitter guide that I wrote here too. So if you're planning to go to Ethereal Remitter and you're specifically trying to target a strategy, it is a good idea to try to save some rerolls for this. So two of the most powerful remitter powers here are Vestige of Helia. So Vestige of Helia is the one where all spells cost 1 less, all units have permanent spell shield, and I want to emphasize that, permanent spell shield. So what happens in the Lissandra fight is she will spam Frostbites, she will spam Entomb, and she will spam Buried in Ice. They are absolutely brutal. She can play so many of them that, like, it just doesn't give you a chance to defend yourself, and then she wins out from that. And Vestige of Helia completely protects you and shuts those down. So probably the most powerful Ethereal Remitter power. Now, having said that, it is important to remember that she's still going to get her Thralls. So the Thralls are on her map. They're going to be 9/9s at base with Tough and Overwhelm. I believe they give it the Tough item on the card, and I mean the Thralls just have Overwhelm anyways. So you have to, even if you have Vestige of Helia, you still have to deal with 9/9 Tough Overwhelms. So do keep that in mind. If you have a champion that likes to go small and wide, that might not be the best way to do the Lissandra map. So the alternative that I would recommend is, if you can make a small wide board, you might actually want to go for Mortal Marks. So Mortal Marks is when any player summons a unit, set its health to 1, almost kind of like small stuff, except this time it's just the health, the power stays normal. So yeah, and this will always proc last. Remember that, always procs last. So even if they have the vulnerable +0/+2 power, that will proc first, and then the health will still go to 1. It will always go to 1 at the end. So this one is really good for champions where you're going wide, and I've used this a lot for my clears as well. Now, having said that, I mean, there's a lot of remitter powers, and the odds of you finding the exact one you want are not that high. You know, you're only seeing 3 at a time, and there's a big list here. So sometimes you have to settle. So things that you might want to take if you have to settle. So there's a power called Mercy Killings, which is round end, kill all damaged units. It is kind of like almost a slower Mortal Marks, because, I mean, the thing with Mortal Marks is if you do any damage to a unit, it will essentially kill it, whereas Mercy Killings, any damage will kill it at the end of the turn. So you might end up taking some damage first. I will also say Mercy Killings does actually mess up the AI a little bit, because the AI knows that if they swing and you block with a chump, that their unit will die. So it actually does mess them up into not wanting to attack very often. So do keep that in mind too. I'm not actually totally used to that AI algorithm for Mercy Killings either. But this can really help you. I mean, like, the 9/9 Thralls will go down a lot easier with Mercy Killings. The only thing is, if you're specifically playing for S ranks, it's not the best thing, because, like I said, you're probably going to take the hit first before you're able to kill the unit. But, I mean, it is what it is. You'll probably, you know, it'll help you get the W, but it might not help you get the S rank. But it's definitely a good alternative if you can't find one of those other two, the Helia or Mortal Marks. So another power that I do sometimes take is called the Isles Remember. So game start, shuffle 3 copies of the Ruination into both players' decks. They cost 0 mana. And so with the Isles Remember, what you want to do is you want to go to the Mind Meld and cut your deck really small so that you have higher odds of drawing the Isles Remember. Now, of course, this could backfire because you let Lissandra develop her board. You Ruination, you clear their board, you build your board, and then they might just Ruination you back, which would suck. But I mean, it is what it is. This is not your top choice, but it's an alternative that you take if you can't find what you're wanting. Ascension Toll is another interesting one. So this is the one where when you level a champion, all players discard their hand. So this one is really good against Lissandra if you can level up on turn 1 or turn 2. Because usually on turn 1, she'll play the Lissandra and then 1 Thrall, if you're unlucky, maybe 2 Thralls. And then if you can make her discard after that, that means she's not going to have any Entombs left. She's not going to have any Buried in Ice left. She's probably not going to have any more freezes. It makes it a lot easier. Like, of course, you're also not going to have many resources, but when it comes to kind of catching up on the top decks, usually you should come out ahead of her, because she's going to draw one big thing, like one big unit or one big spell, whereas you're probably going to draw cards that either make more cards or draw more cards, so it usually does benefit the player. But having said that, I do want to say that if your deck can't really level up until turn 3 or 4, it's either useless because it's too late, or sometimes it just becomes detrimental because at that point she's built such a big board that she doesn't even necessarily need the Entombs and stuff like that, so it might not even be, like, it might just be like actually detrimental at a point. And then the last thing I said here is pretty much everything else is pretty much useless or sometimes even detrimental. There's a few considerations. So there's a couple aggro ones like Unstoppable Force, which is +3/+3 Overwhelm Can't Block. I've taken that I think once or twice with success. Frenzied Fighting is a similar one. Allies have +2/+2 and then they take 2 damage at the end of turn. You can take that for a very aggressive build as well. Unstoppable Force is kind of a, or sorry, not Unstoppable, Not So Fast is kind of a weird one. It's round start, stun the strongest and weakest unit. Obviously good with Yasuo, but I mean, if you can manipulate the units on board, it can be really good, but it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard to get the right setup. Also, Lissandra really doesn't have weakest units, so it's mainly going to be stun the strongest, and then if you're winning on board, then you're just stunning your own stuff and slowing the game down. But slowing the game down is not necessarily a terrible thing against Lissandra. And then the last thing I have here is just Empire Above All. So that's another one where it just kind of helps to ramp the aggression. And this one might seem like, well, you know, Lissandra tends to be the aggressor, so do you really want her to get the +2 attack as well? And the answer is, I mean, it really depends on your build. So, I mean, there's a lot of champions and builds where you don't want Lissandra to get even more stats, but there's some where if you're going wider or something like that, you might actually want those. But these are like really low consolation prizes. These are kind of not things you're looking for unless you have the right setup. Okay, the last thing I'm going to talk about here are my champion tier list. So the champions that tend to do good against Lissandra are champions that can stall her out. The longer you can go, the better it is for you in general against the Lissandra fight. And then the second thing is there are just some champions that are just so broken that, I mean, they'll still just win. So an example of broken champions are like Aurelion Sol, Nidalee, LeBlanc. Nidalee especially with like scissors, spectral scissors or something like that. LeBlanc works with so many different builds, works with Guardian's Orb, works with Stalker's Blade. I've done like a lot of LeBlanc clears just to test out different builds, and they pretty much all work. If you can think of a good LeBlanc build, it probably works. Aurelian Soul, just super strong champion, especially if you have the 4-star with the double stats. The double stats will just carry you. If not, I mean, you just hit the mana reductions on your champions and still bully them out with champions. And then you kind of have your Stally champion. So that's Kindred, Yasuo, Morgana. Kindred is actually a Stally champion because you can use Everfrost on the Kindred, and then use Spirit Journeys to keep stunning them, stun locking them. You can do Kindred with Stalker's Blade. The only problem with that is Kindred's a little bit small with the 4 attack. It does end up being a bit short. But if you can find let's say like mortal marks with Kindred, it's GG. It's done. And the stalkers, because then they'll never really be able to keep anything on board. Yasuo and Morgana, you're just locking out the opponent. Yasuo stun locks, Morgana curse locks. One thing I will actually say about Morgana, surprisingly, sometimes the Lissandra will just have 10 cards in hand and they actually won't have enough hand space to lock out all their units, which is a little annoying. So do be careful about that. The other thing about Morgana is I think her best build runs GGC and Chemtech, but GGC and Chemtech, that's going to count as 2 cast spells when you stun their unit, which is kind of, you know, it means that you pretty much only have 1 more card, or you know, you'll have to spend the penalty if you're playing more. So that does kind of hurt. And you might say, well, just run her without Chemtech. I mean, you can, but then the curses are not very expensive, and they can actually play out of their curses. So it's actually kind of annoying. So the Chemtech is not even that bad on Morgana. I usually do run the Chemtech on Morgana versus Lissandra, but keep that in mind. It is going to limit the amount of cards you can play. And if you don't want to run Chemtech, that's fine. I mean, you also have a harder time with the early matches. The next category I have here are pretty good. So this is more than 50%, but like not necessarily the very best champions. But if you have them leveled, if you have them 25 to 30 and either 2 or 3 stars, you can definitely give it a go. I would say, you know, try it out, because these champions are good enough that they can often carry. So here I have listed Varus. Varus was a bit of a surprise to me because, again, Varus has the double casting, which does mean that you're going to be limited on the amount of cards you can play against Aurelian Soul. But, I mean, it works. It was working really well for me. So, and I've done multiple clear on most champions now, so I do feel comfortable putting him here. Jax also was quite good. Gwen, Diana, these are just powerful aggro champions that can get big. Ashe is kind of interesting because I thought Ashe was going to be kind of in the same category as Yasuo. Morgana, she does actually feel a step down. I'm not exactly sure. I think it's mainly because the Ashe herself, once she leaves the board, you're a lot weaker, like compared to Yasuo or Morgana. Especially Morgana. Morgana doesn't have to be on the board to do kind of her deck thing. Yasuo is nice because he will clear things as he's doing his thing. Whereas Ashe, if she's not on the board, you're not really getting your GGCs. You're not getting your freezes on attacks. So she's a little bit more susceptible to removal and entombs and things like that. Here I also have Garen. Garen kind of surprised me too. I was using a Starforged build just to get a little extra mana. Annie, just build a stun build. Jhin, just, you know, make him big. Nico, I was using like a Guardian's Orb build. Evelyn, just your standard kind of rally stun on level up. Elder Dragon, again, just kind of another aggro champion that is actually fast enough for this. Leona, you're looking for a stun build. And then Illaoi, kind of like Evelyn, you use your standard Illaoi to try to OTK or 2-turn kill them. Here's the mid list. I'm not going to talk about the builds for the mid list. It is interesting that Jinx falls all the way down to the mid list. You know, I will tell you right now, if Lissandra has the I am inevitable power, the one that gives them +2/+2 when they take damage, and you're playing Jinx, reset your run. Reset your run. I mean, it's not impossible, but you're going to have such a miserable time. It's going to be so painful, and you probably are still going to lose. So I would just reset the run. I'm not even joking. These other ones, there was a few surprises. Like Samira was a surprise because I thought, well, if you can only play 3 cards a turn, it makes it really difficult to play the 6 to get her rallies, which is like her big thing. But I mean, all you do is you just plan out the 3 cards so that you are hitting the 6, and it does actually work out, surprisingly. So actually, she was not that bad. And then for the hard ones, so they run into 2 issues with the hard ones. So issue number 1, like something like a Teemo, is their stuff is just too small and just gets massacred by ice shards. So that's issue number 1. Or issue number 2 is it just comes online too late, like Ornn, Mordekaiser, Bard, Nasus. They're just doing their thing too late, and you're just dying to aggression on the first 3-4 turns. So that's the difficulty with them. For these ones, you may want to try... there's a couple builds that are like generic builds. Actually, I should actually add them to the guide. But there's a couple generic builds that I do recommend. One is Oath Stargem. Oath Stargem works very... Oath of Guardians, which is an epic relic, and then Stargem the rare. So that works really well on cheap champions, something like a Teemo. I used that for Teemo, and it worked all right. And then the other thing that I would probably do for these late game champions is kind of mostly abandon their strategy and just go for Starforged Gauntlet and Luminous Orb to get the mana ramp and try to do other stuff earlier in the game. So I would definitely do that for like Ornn, Mordekaiser, Bard. Well, Mordekaiser doesn't even need the Luminous. He could just use the Starforged. But you can do that with Ornn and Bard. Hopefully you guys have Starforged Gauntlets. Because that was a purchase-only relic. I think it's out of the shop now. It will be reintroduced into the epic relic pool at some time, so you will be able to pull it from a gold reliquary sometime in the future. But right now, it was only available through the shop, so if you didn't buy it, unfortunately, you're a little bit out of luck for the moment. Okay, I think everybody's heard enough of my voice right now, but that's my guide. Again, I'll put the links in the video description here. I'll put the links to my Twitch stream, the Discord, and of course to the document itself. I hope this helps you guys out. You know, if you guys are having a hard time, these are the champions that I recommend. I've listed 6 here that I strongly recommend, so hopefully that helps you a little bit more with accessibility, especially because ASOL is only through the monthlies at the moment. But I would even say, like, this list of the pretty goods, if you give it a couple tries, and by a couple tries, it might even take 3 or 4 tries, but if you give it a few tries, you should be able to get a W through Lissandra as well. Do not be discouraged if you lose. I mean, I consider myself a pretty good player, and I take a lot of losses to Lissandra still. This is with level 30 3-star champions, okay? And I'm still taking losses, so don't feel bad about it. Sometimes you just have to kind of like pick yourself up and try again. It is a very difficult adventure. It will get easier in time when they release constellations and the so-called like up to 6-star star powers. But at this time, it's quite difficult. Like a mid-range champion, you're kind of hoping to win maybe 50% of the time with a 3-star level 30 champion. Okay, so don't get discouraged. Some of these will take a few tries. All right, that's going to be the video for today. Thanks for watching. And if you do like the this kind of like guide to specific adventures or anything in specific, let me know. I can definitely make more guides. I have had a few requests for them, so just let me know in the comments. All right, cheers, take care.